Sijbolt. Would you like to come with them? Sijbolt Noorda doesn't need too much words on presentation, but as president of the Observatory Magna Carta Universitatum, has been behind the idea of this conference since the first moment. With him and with Alessandra Scagliarini in Paris, in 3 minutes we decided that that was something to be done. And I'm very proud to have been able to join us. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Federico. Well, dear colleagues, dear students, one of the lessons I remember from my classes in ancient rhetorics is the concept of the captatio benevolentiae. That is something you say at the beginning of your speech that will earn you a benevolent attitude of the audience. So here it comes. My talk will be much shorter than announced. When I walked towards this meeting room this morning, I was remembering my very first European conference. Don't be shocked, it's over 50 years ago. I was then the international secretary of the student union in my country, and we organized an international conference on access to higher education. And why I recalled that meeting long ago was because of the great differences. Here we talk about the European higher education area, comprising of 48 countries. Then we were having 12 countries, the northwestern part of Europe and France and Italy. The rest of Europe was behind the Iron Curtain. In Greece, the colonels were having the power, and we protested against the Franco regime in Spain. So Europe was divided up into blocks. And if occasionally we would join student conferences in Prague or in Moscow, at the other end of the Iron Curtain, we would sit and speak with students that were unable to travel the way we were in the western part of Europe. What a change in only one generation. Many things to be grateful for, and a real precious legacy. The same thing is true of this whole Bologna process. It is very hard to imagine that under the present international political circumstances, 48 or even 29 countries would get together and make this alliance to work towards an open, inclusive higher education community across Europe, from Poland to Kazakhstan and from Iceland to Armenia. It is something to really be grateful for, and it's something that we should really celebrate. And that's exactly why we are here, celebrating the decision made in those years of optimism, celebrating that precious legacy, and celebrating the beauty of working together over those years towards the future. Yet we did not come to Bologna to just celebrate. We came to celebrate because we wanted to move on. We came to celebrate because we wanted to move towards the future. We wanted to say to each other, prenez courage, take courage. Let's work towards the future with a new fire, with a new enthusiasm towards a new agenda, because our world requires that new commitment, that new engagement. I have been, since the Bergen Ministerial Conference in 2005, I think, been to most of the ministerial conferences. And they were serious meetings, to use a euphemism. And in a more open way, sometimes very dull. But if you read the results, and if you draw the red line between all of them, there is consistency and there is engagement. And there also were beautiful moments. And one of my all-time highlights is the ministerial conference in Armenia, in Yerevan, when 76% of all ministers and all of us present there spent hours of dancing after dinner one evening. And we said to each other the next day, today's conference, today's meeting is going much better because we have been dancing last night than any other part of a ministerial conference before. So my suggestion, Federico, to the Rome program of next year, include a dance and have ministers dance for hours before they take the final resolutions. I used to be the president of the University of Amsterdam in the Netherlands. And I used to say in those days, a university without students is like a bicycle without wheels. And a bicycle without wheels is a sorry sight. I'm very glad that we have been able to include in this particular meeting quite a few students to make clear that we want a riding bicycle. But this metaphor is also applicable to the Bologna process. A Bologna process that only consists of declarations of ministers is like a bicycle without wheels. A Bologna process that talks about topics that never end up in the classrooms, that are not changing the practices of innovation in education and in societal relationship, is a bicycle without wheels. So we have to make sure that when we further develop the Bologna process, we keep this alliance between the ministerial level and the institutions, between the ministers and the students, between the leaders in government policies and the faculty, as a strong alliance forward. It's only 2 feet that make it easy to walk, and we need these 2 parts in this process very much. Today we have been covering 5 important topics that we as organizers thought would be important for the Bologna agenda in the coming years. First of all, we again stressed the importance of academic values as key to the well-functioning of higher education. We have to realize which are the ideals and values we are driven by. And these should be values that are inclusive. These should be values that are showing social responsibility rather than egocentric values of furthering your personal career and being the most cherished and most applauded to institution in your region and in this part of the world. Identifying the key values driving higher education in this part of the world, academic freedom, autonomy, social responsibility, equity, integrity, fairness, and what have you, is key to having a joint responsibility towards the future. And we should not just identify them, we should live by them, and we should look into them. And countries should speak to each other about them and hold their colleagues accountable for either living academic values or cheating. We have had discussions and keynote contributions on student-centered learning. It's one of those concepts that has been with us for many years. We have it in the European standards and guidelines. We use it in quality assurance all the time. And yet we know, or we should know, that the practice of student-centered learning is still far from ideal. We still have a long way to go to really make student development the essence of educational success and of accomplishment in higher education. One of the keynotes this morning said higher education is all about acquiring the art of reflective judgments. Reflecting on your own practice, reflecting on the own situation you're working in, reflective judgment as a professional, as an academic. Well, learning reflective judgment is not going to happen by reading a book. It's not going to happen by listening to your professor or watching a MOOC. Reflective judgment requires educating and developing yourself in real life situations. And it's that kind of thing we're referring to when we talk about student-centered learning. A third theme that we included in the program of today is universities providing leadership for sustainable development. Sustainable development goals are encompassing most of the development of modern societies, not just in this part of the world, but in the global south as well, and in the Americas and Asia, just as in Europe. And it's a very positive sign that over the last 10, 15 years, so many universities have been making those sustainable development goals and the Millennium Goals that came before part and parcel of their mission. Yet again, like with student-centered learning, we still have a long way to go to make this a reality. The learn, live, and lead model that some of us have been practicing in some countries is still not a common trait in all. The development of the needed interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary approaches to really address sustainability issues is in most cases still far away. A fourth theme we discussed is on the social dimensions of higher education. And this is a particularly tricky one, because for a long time, and in many cases, we at the university have thought that whatever we do, it is contributing to the public good. It's contributing to the social welfare of our societies. And we are only relatively recently discovering that that is far too easy. When you really look into the effect, the impact of a university in society, you will find that in many cases, universities are much more beneficial to the establishment of a society and to social and cultural elites in a society than they are to society at large. Every society knows strong voices, powerful voices, and much weaker voices. And to truly be responsive to society means responding to the weak voices just as you do to the powerful ones, and creating and maintaining a good and fair balance there. This morning, our colleague Chris Brink gave a talk on the social dimension of higher education and warned us not to just celebrate what we are good at, but really address questions like what are we good for, and identify the kind of social needs and priorities we should be addressing. The last theme is also a theme that has been with us for a long time in the Bologna process, the relations between education, competencies and skills, and the labor market of the future. And again, like in these other cases of student-centered learning and the case of social dimensions, we have to dig deeper. We have to be more self-critical and have another look at the labor market of the future and the way we contribute to it as universities. Two things seem to be very important. Are we, as universities, also engaging in restructuring and developing the labor market, and not just taking the labor market for granted? We know of many countries where there is a rise in numbers of graduates, and at the same time, an increase in unemployment of graduates, showing that there is a mismatch between the teaching, between the diplomas, and the development in the labor market. And in many cases, it is due to the fact that the labor market is staying behind, is remaining an underdeveloped labor market, is not innovative, is not modernized. But the other side is true as well. In many cases, universities think they are contributing by teaching, by having students acquire the needed skills, while the labor market says, well, very sorry, but this is not good enough. This is not a real and good match. So all of these 5 points that I've just been slightly, very shortly reviewing, all of this is quite an agenda. And we want this to be part of the Bologna agenda in the years to come. But how are we going to make it happen? Because as I said before, nothing on the agenda is a reality until it lands in the classroom, until it lands in the reality of today and in the competencies of students of the future. So yes, it's important to include it in the joint agenda of the European higher education area. Yes, it is important that governments translate it into their national policy agendas. But above all, it is important that we live and practice it locally, and we make this agenda a real process of which we at the university, students and faculty, are the owners and accepting agency. But once I say this, I realize that this is not easy. It won't work if we take this agenda as just a nice add-on, as something nice to have on top of everything we do already. Let me give you a little example. At my university, at the University of Amsterdam, years ago, we started a new interdisciplinary undergraduate study program called Future Planet Studies. 6 or 7 different disciplines contributing to it, and many students enrolling. After 4 years, we for the first time reviewed whether students were satisfied. And yes, they said they would do it again. And yes, they said we would advise our peers to do this. But they were also critical. They said, yes, the program was interdisciplinary, and we trained ourselves being interdisciplinary. But we don't like to tell you, but you teachers, you still have a long way to go to become interdisciplinary yourselves. We really like it that you volunteer to be a teacher in this program. But would you please next time do a little bit more of a interdisciplinary preparation yourself? I kind of like that outcome. Why? Because it clearly shows that if we want to change our agenda, if we want things to change for students of future generations, we, the leaders and the professors at the university, the researchers and the doctoral students, we have to change ourselves. We cannot just add something to the agenda, add something to the program and say, well, we've done it, we've solved it. The real challenge that this agenda, this new agenda, this future program for higher education in the European area is posing to us is the need to rethink and reset ourselves as institutions, as teachers, as leaders and professors. The real truth of innovative, future-oriented higher education lays in the realization of the living values of the future agenda. And this means we have to say goodbye to some of the cherished priorities of the past. We have to reset our bonuses and our impetus. We have to introduce new criteria of what is considered to be good and successful performance and what is not. And this is truly taking courage. And this is truly why I said that we have come here to celebrate in order to prendre courage, take courage to embrace that agenda. 2 final remarks in conclusion. The first one has to do with my role as president of the Magna Carta Observatory. When 20 years ago the Bologna process started, it was against the backdrop of the optimism of the 80s. And in 1988, hundreds of European rectors came to Bologna to sign the very first Magna Carta Universitatem, stating the basic principles of higher education. And they did so because they thought, when we will become one European community between East and West, North and South, we need to be clear about what is uniting us, what we can trust our colleagues will be believing and acting upon. So they stated things like, to meet the needs of the world around us, universities must be free, independent from any moral and intellectual authority, be it of economic powers or of political powers. They stated the need for campuses to be places of tolerance and respect. Not because they wanted the license to be free and independent, not because they wanted lonely riders, monastery type in the world of Europe. No, exactly because they wanted to be serving society by being autonomous and free. Last year, the present community of the Magna Carta Observatory has been rethinking this statement of 1988. And they came to the conclusion, it's beautiful. No word of it does no longer apply. Yet, in the last 30 years, our world has changed. And we are facing new challenges. We're not just talking about a European community anymore, we talk about a worldwide community. We are not just talking about the freedoms that university needs, we are also talking about the commitments that universities need to engage and take upon themselves. And on that basis, and because of this, we have taken the decision to draft a new Magna Carta Universitatem. And this draft is available since a couple of weeks on our website, magnacarta.org. And it's open for consultation. And I would like to invite all your comments to it, because learning from your comments, we are seriously considering, when we meet again as Magna Carta community next year in September here in Bologna, when it is supported by the majority of colleagues around the world, we will then launch, in addition to the Magna Carta of 1988, the Magna Carta 2020, stressing commitments to present-day challenges, saying things like universities accept that they have a responsibility to be in solidarity with and responsive to the aspirations and challenges of the world they serve. Stating that universities aim to be non-discriminatory spaces of tolerance and respectfulness, where diversity of perspectives flourish and where inclusivity, anchored in principles of equity and fairness, prevail. Universities are committed to education as a human right, a public good available to all. And the beautiful talk that Sijbolt gave earlier this afternoon about education and its value to the most vulnerable of our students in our societies are the kind of things included in this new statement. So again, I would like to invite you to look at our consultation website and respond to it. Which brings me to my very final and concluding remark. After me, Rector Francesco Ubertini of Alma Mater Studiorum, the University of Bologna, will speak. And he will no doubt be thanking all of us and his colleagues and staff and the co-organizers in having all of this and making this happen. And he will be glad to do so. And my prediction is that he will be forgetting one important element. He will be forgetting, out of modesty, to thank himself. So I would like to take this opportunity to ask you to give a big hand to the rector of this university for this beautiful initiative. Thank you very much.